When an automaker starts building ocean-going car carriers, the obvious question is, why? BYD already makes batteries, motors, semiconductors, and cars. It has factories across China and is expanding production in Brazil, Hungary, and Southeast Asia. So why add shipping to the list? Because BYD has reached a point where its biggest constraint may no longer be manufacturing cars. It is moving them. The scale is difficult to ignore. BYD sold around 4.6 million new energy vehicles in 2025, and its overseas sales had already reached more than 900,000 units by November. The company now sells in more than 100 countries and regions. That creates a problem the traditional auto industry could largely avoid. Cars cannot simply be stacked into ordinary containers. They require specialized roll-on/roll-off vessels, and those ships cannot be produced nearly as quickly as a new vehicle factory. BYD therefore ordered its own ships. The Explorer No. 1 can carry about 7,000 vehicles, while the BYD Shenzhen can carry 9,200, making it the largest car carrier in operation by capacity when delivered in 2025. BYD's first ship was only the beginning. The company plans 7 more vessels within 2 years. This is not really a shipping story. It is a story about what happens when China's automobile industry grows faster than the infrastructure built to export it. And that distinction matters because BYD is not solving a temporary inconvenience. It is trying to remove one of the few remaining pieces of its global supply chain that it does not directly control. The most revealing statistic in this story has little to do with cars. In 2025, Chinese shipyards accounted for 56.1% of global shipbuilding output. They also captured 69% of new global orders and held 66.8% of the global order book. China has now led the world on these 3 measures for 16 consecutive years. That changes the economics of BYD's decision. If an American automaker suddenly decided to build a fleet of specialized car carriers, it would be entering an industry dominated by a relatively small group of specialist operators and shipyards. BYD is doing something very different. It is operating inside the world's largest shipbuilding ecosystem. The same industrial economy can manufacture the batteries, motors, electronics, and vehicles, and it can also build the ships that transport them. That is the real Chinese advantage that is often missed in Western discussions about EVs. The debate usually focuses on subsidies, labor costs, or battery prices. Those factors matter, but they do not explain the entire picture. The deeper advantage is industrial density. Thousands of suppliers, enormous production capacity, mature ports, steel production, battery manufacturing, electronics, and shipbuilding concentrated within one ecosystem. That creates an unusual feedback loop. More EV production creates more exports. More exports create demand for ships. More ships reduce dependence on foreign logistics providers. Greater logistics control makes overseas expansion easier. Overseas expansion creates more demand for Chinese-designed vehicles and components. BYD is effectively trying to turn its supply chain into a competitive weapon. But there is an uncomfortable question here. If the strategy is so powerful, why don't Toyota, Volkswagen, or Tesla simply copy it? Because vertical integration has a cost. Owning more of the supply chain means owning more capital-intensive assets, carrying more operational risk, and potentially becoming less flexible. A shipping company can spread vessel utilization across hundreds of customers. BYD initially has to fill its ships with its own vehicles. That means BYD is making a very specific bet, that its global exports will remain large enough for these assets to stay productive. So far, the numbers suggest the bet is reasonable, but it is still a bet. Tesla's greatest achievement was proving that electric vehicles could become mainstream. BYD's challenge to Tesla is different. It is proving that electric vehicles can be industrialized at enormous scale. In 2025, BYD sold roughly 2.26 million battery electric vehicles, compared with Tesla's approximately 1.64 million. That means BYD had already moved ahead of Tesla in annual BEV volume. But volume alone does not explain why the competitive gap could widen. Look at what each company is building around the car. Tesla has enormous strengths in software, battery technology, vehicle electronics, autonomous driving development and brand recognition. Those advantages are real, and Tesla's July 2026 China-made vehicle sales were still up 37.8% year-over-year. BYD, however, is building something different. It controls a much larger portion of the physical supply chain, sells across a broader range of price segments, is expanding overseas manufacturing, and is now developing its own transportation capacity. That matters because the next phase of the EV race may not be won by the company with the cleverest software demo. It may be won by the company that can produce a competitive vehicle at the lowest sustainable cost and put it in front of consumers across dozens of markets. There are already signs of that shift. Chinese automakers now account for roughly 15% of new UK car registrations, while Chinese brands are continuing to gain ground across Europe. Even more revealing is BYD's expansion beyond China. In July 2026, the company sold 23,465 vehicles in Brazil and reached a 9.1% market share, while its local factory is expected to produce around 180,000 vehicles during 2026. This is how BYD can gradually neutralize one of its biggest weaknesses: tariffs. If exporting from China becomes too expensive, build locally. If shipping capacity becomes scarce, own ships. If battery costs matter, manufacture batteries. If electronics become strategically important, develop them internally. The strategy is not complicated. Every time the global market creates a bottleneck, BYD tries to own the bottleneck. That is why Tesla should be concerned. There is a danger in celebrating vertical integration too much. A company can control everything and still lose money. BYD's ships are a perfect example. A car carrier is a multi-decade capital asset. It costs money whether it is full or empty. It needs maintenance, crews, fuel, and port access. And the economics depend heavily on freight rates. If BYD ships 9,200 vehicles to Europe and then has nothing meaningful to carry back to China, part of that capacity becomes dead weight. Worse, the global shipping market could eventually add enough vessels to push freight rates down. In that scenario, the very ships that look strategically brilliant today could become expensive assets that generate lower returns than simply chartering vessels when needed. There is also a much bigger geopolitical risk. BYD's global expansion assumes that Chinese EVs will continue gaining access to foreign markets. But governments are already reacting. The EU has imposed additional duties on Chinese-made EVs, while the United States has taken an even harder position toward Chinese EV imports. So BYD is simultaneously fighting three battles: competition from Tesla and legacy automakers, brutal price competition inside China, and increasing protectionism overseas. That is why the real question is not whether BYD's ship strategy is clever. It is whether BYD can keep growing fast enough to justify the enormous amount of capital it is putting behind its global expansion. If it can, vertical integration becomes a moat. If it cannot, vertical integration becomes a burden. And that is the uncomfortable part of this story that the BYD hype often ignores. This is ultimately why the ships matter. BYD is not necessarily trying to beat Tesla at Tesla's own game. It is changing the game. Tesla built an extraordinary technology and consumer brand around the electric car. BYD is building something closer to an industrial operating system for electric transportation. Its 2025 revenue reached approximately 804 billion renminbi, while R&D spending reached 63.4 billion renminbi. By the end of 2025, BYD had produced 15 million new energy vehicles cumulatively. The important point is not that BYD spends a lot of money. It is what that money is building: factories, batteries, electronics, vehicles, overseas production, and now ships. That creates a possibility that should make every traditional automaker uncomfortable. BYD may not defeat Tesla because it has a superior version of the Model 3. It may defeat Tesla because it can manufacture a competitive EV in more price segments, in more countries, using a deeper supply chain, while controlling more of the journey between factory and customer. That is a much harder advantage to copy. Tesla still has formidable strengths, and it would be foolish to declare the winner today. But if the EV industry enters a decade defined primarily by scale, affordability, and global manufacturing rather than premium technology alone, BYD has positioned itself extremely well. The ship is therefore not the story. The ship is the evidence. It shows that BYD is willing to spend enormous amounts of capital to remove bottlenecks that most automakers simply accept as someone else's problem. And that may be the defining difference between BYD and Tesla. Tesla asked the world to believe that the future of transportation would be electric. BYD is building the industrial infrastructure required to manufacture that future at scale. If that strategy works, Tesla may not lose because BYD builds a better car. Tesla could lose because BYD builds a better machine around the car.